What would your final words be if you knew no one would ever see your face again? Throughout history, cave divers have pushed into the darkest places on Earth, where one wrong turn can mean death. And sometimes those divers don't come back. Yet a few in their final hours left behind chilling last messages. These messages are not just notes. They are confessions, love letters, memories of a human standing face to face with death. Number 1. Peter Verhulsel, Sterkfontein Caves, South Africa, 1984. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be completely alone in the dark? Where there is no wind, no sunlight, just silence. Now imagine knowing you will never make it back out. That is the haunting story of Peter Verhulsel, a diver whose last message was scratched into sand deep beneath the earth. It was echoed with love and despair he left for his loved ones. The Sterkfontein Caves in South Africa are famous for their history. Archaeologists call them the cradle of humankind because of the ancient fossils found there. But beneath the bones of early humans lie vast, flooded caverns, a black, mysterious underworld that attracts explorers with mystery and danger. In 1984, 29-year-old Peter Verhulsel entered those caves with a tank of air, a light, and the courage to go where few had ever gone. He was never a reckless daredevil. He was a careful diver, fascinated by the secrets of the caves. He wanted to know it better than anyone. But in the underworld, even one mistake can turn fascination into fatality. And that is what happened to Peter. Somewhere deep inside, he lost his way. The tunnels were narrowing in his way, and visibility was dropping so unexpectedly. The passages started to trick him like a maze built to confuse. He couldn't find the way back to the surface. Instead of finding the exit, he swam deeper into the cave system until he reached an isolated chamber with no way out. He managed to survive by finding tiny air pockets, but he was cut off from the surface and rescuers couldn't reach him. Rescuers later discovered that Peter managed to survive for an almost unthinkable amount of time. That was 3 weeks. 3 weeks trapped underground, surviving only on tiny air pockets, completely cut off from the sun and from hope. Can you picture it? Waking up each day in the same darkness and in the same silence, knowing the world above is moving on, while you remain stuck beneath it. And then came the moment when Peter must have realized the truth. The rescue was not coming, and his body was growing weaker while craving for oxygen. So he chose to leave behind something more powerful than fear. On a small underground beach beside the black water, Peter bent down and pressed his final words into the sand. Not a diary or an explanation, but just a message. It said, "I love you, Sherlyn Ma." That was it. No cry for help, nor a bitter word about his fate. Just love from a son thinking of his mother and a young man whispering a last goodbye to his partner Shirley. When rescuers eventually found him, his body was lying beside those words. In the end, his last act was not of panic or despair. It was of love and devotion. Just imagine being his family, waiting above ground all those days, praying for his safe return. Imagine the moment they learned the truth, and instead of his arms around them, they received his message written in sand. It was all they had left of him. Peter Verhulsel's story is more than just a tragedy of exploration. It is a chilling reminder of how fragile we are in the face of nature's power. But it is also a reminder of what really matters when everything else is swept away. In his final hours, Peter did not think of fame or the record he might set, or the caves he could not escape. He thought of love, and that is what he left behind. A diver, trapped in darkness, chose to send a message that still shines brighter than any light he carried with him, and that was, "I love you, Sherlyn Ma." Number 2. Dave Shaw, Boesmansgat Cave, South Africa. What if the last promise you ever made was the one that cost you your life? Imagine a place where your light is swallowed whole, where silence fights against you and every breath is borrowed time. And now imagine choosing to go there, knowing it has already taken others. That is the haunting story of Dave Shaw, a diver who entered the black waters of Bushman's Hole not to set a record, but to bring someone home. But what he found instead was a fate written in the silence. Bushman's Hole, also known as Boesmansgat, lies hidden on a remote farm in South Africa. From the surface, it looks like nothing more than a dark pond covered in duckweed. Just calm and quiet. But beneath that is one of the deepest freshwater caves in the world that stretches almost 900 feet into blackness. For decades, it has attracted divers from around the globe. Some returned with stories, while others never returned at all. One of those who never came back was Dion Dreyer, a 20-year-old diver who got trapped in 1994 during a practice dive. His body disappeared into the depths, leaving his family with nothing but questions and Bushman's Hole with another secret. 10 years later, in October 2004, Dave Shaw descended into the sinkhole. He was a technical diver, an airline pilot, and a man driven by determination. On that dive, at nearly 900 feet below the surface, he broke records few believed was possible. But it was not the records that changed his life. It was what he saw in the darkness. Deep down the water, he saw the body of Dion Dreyer. Dave rose to the surface with one thought running in his mind, that he had to bring Dion home. In the weeks that followed, Dave became consumed by that mission. He contacted Dion's parents and promised them he would recover their son's body. It was no longer about exploration or glory. It was about giving a grieving family the closure they had been wanting for a decade. On January 8, 2005, before dawn, Dave and his team stood at the edge of the black water. The air was cold and the silence was too heavy. He strapped on his gear, checked his equipment, and descended once more into the darkness. At nearly 900 feet down, Dave found Dion's remains exactly where he had seen them before. Carefully, he began the process of placing the body into a recovery bag. But he didn't know that the cave had other plans. When Dave tried to move the body, something unexpected happened. Instead of sinking, Dion's corpse began to float. After years underwater, his remains had transformed into a waxy, buoyant substance known as adipocere. The body started to resist while twisting, rising and tangling with the recovery bag and even Dave's own equipment. Down in the whole darkness, every movement became a struggle. Dave's hands were occupied while his breathing grew heavier. His light cord got tangled and the cave was closing in. Above, his support divers waited for his signal, but nothing came. The light that should have flickered, which was the sign that he was moving, never appeared. Only silence and stillness came for them. Minutes turned into hours, and then the waiting turned into desperate hope. When divers finally returned days later to recover the equipment, they found not only Dion's body, but Dave Shaw's as well. His final dive had become his last. In an effort to bring Dion home, Dave just got trapped in the hands of death. It was a testimony that even the most experienced diver, even with the best preparation, can be undone by the mysterious depths of Bushman's Hole. Imagine the moment Dion's parents learned the truth. After 10 years, their son had finally been found, but so had the man who tried to bring him back. Instead of closure, they were handed a double tragedy where two men bound forever in the same grave. But what shocked the world was his final words to his teammates. It was not a cry nor a statement for the cameras. He understood the brutal mathematics of deep diving at nearly 900 feet, where even the smallest mistake can mean death. Yet he accepted it and told them, "Let this be my grave." Those words were more than a statement, they were an oath. If the cave claimed him, he would not fight the truth of it. He was willing to lie forever in the same place where Dion Dreyer had vanished 10 years earlier, and in that single statement, Shaw revealed the weight of his mission. It was a promise to a family who had already lost a son. And if it cost him his life, so be it. Dave Shaw's story is not just about death. He could have left Dion where he found him, or he could have walked away with his records and his life. But he didn't. He chose to risk everything, not for glory, but for love, loyalty, and a promise made to grieving parents. His last dive reminds us of something beautiful. In the face of darkness, the greatest light we can carry is not pride, but compassion. Dave Shaw entered Bushman's Hole to bring one man home, but instead the cave kept them both. A diver swallowed by the earth, leaving behind not just silence, but sacrifice. Number 3. Jason Tuskis, Florida, USA, 1987. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to know you are lost forever? That is the tragic story of Jason Tuss, a boy who vanished into the darkness of Jenkins Creek, leaving behind a final message carved into metal. It was sharp enough to pierce through time itself. Jason was not some thrill-seeking daredevil. He was 17 years old. a high school senior with his whole life in front of him. He was an honor student, a wrestler, already working toward his associate's degree, and his dream was to become a lawyer by 23. A bright, ambitious, ordinary American teen who simply loved the idea of adventure. In February of 1987, he discovered scuba diving and suddenly fell in love with it. By summer, he had logged nearly 100 dives, and he was not done yet. Just curious, eager, and too young to imagine how unforgiving the underwater world could be. On July 21, 1987, Jason and two of his friends, Vincent and Christopher, set out for a simple dive. The Gulf of Mexico trip they had planned had been cancelled by bad weather, so instead they chose the springs at Jenkins Creek, Florida. But Jenkins Creek was no ordinary swimming hole. Beneath its quiet surface was a network of flooded caves. It was of course beautiful to some, but too deadly to others. The locals knew the system as dangerous, filled with twists, silt and tight passages that could blind and trap even seasoned divers. But the boys didn't know that. They were not trained cave divers. They were just teenagers with tanks, flashlights, and a borrowed guideline and were stepping into a world they were not ready for. At 10 a.m., Jason and Vincent went down, while Christopher stayed above to watch their bubbles. At first, the dive seemed too light and even thrilling. But caves are so tricky. The deeper they swam, the narrower the walls pressed in, and the darker the shadows grew. With every kick of their fins, the water was turning black around them. Within moments, their vision dropped to nothing, and their flashlights barely cut through the darkness, and just like that, the panic set in. Vincent managed to follow the line back toward the entrance, but in his terror, he made a fatal mistake. He pulled the line out as he swam and left Jason in darkness. It was the only chance of escape for Jason. Now he was all alone, blind, trapped in a maze of rock and water. Vincent tried to go back for him, but fear won. The visibility was gone and he surfaced, shaken, and rushed for help. Rescue divers were called and Jason's parents were notified. His mother rushed to the springs, praying her son was alive but underground. Jason was already facing the darkest truth that he would not make it out. Hours later, two expert divers entered Jenkins Creek to find him. They followed the maze until, 57 feet deep, they found what no parent ever wants to hear about their child. Jason was sitting on the cave floor with his mask pulled down. His belt was still strapped on and only one fin remained on his foot. His air tank laid a short distance away, still holding several minutes of life he chose not to use. Because Jason had already made his choice. With a steady hand, he had taken out his dive knife and pressed it into the tank. Scratching through the metal, he carved a message for his world. The words were not long, but they carried everything he wanted his family to know. They read, "I love you, Mom, Dad, and Christian." That was it. No panic, no complaint, just love. A final goodbye from a boy who realized his last breath would never reach the surface. It was his mother's birthday, and instead of cake and laughter, she received the most haunting message a parent could ever imagine from a son who had vanished beneath the earth. The family has kept both the tank and a piece of that birthday cake frozen, preserved like Jason's words, his only legacy from the depths of Jenkins Creek. Jason's story is not just a tragedy of youth and inexperience, it is a reminder of how quickly the promise of life can be stolen away. But in that final moment, what remained was not fear, not ambition, not regret. It was love. His message in metal echoes louder than any scream. "I love you, Mom, Dad, and Christian." In the end, these stories are not just about caves or diving or records. They are about what happens when curiosity collides with the silence of the earth. 3 divers and their final messages. 3 voices that reached beyond the water, beyond the darkness, to the people they loved most. Yes, the caves took their bodies, but their final words still echo. Not records, not achievements, not fear, but love. And that is what survives the darkness. So which incident gave you chills? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy videos like this, please like, subscribe, and watch the next one.